Welcome to part 6. You've had 5 straight episodes with tactical tips for saving for a home, but what if you didn't have to save it all? What if your down payment is already sitting in an account with your name on it right now, today, but nobody ever bothered to tell you?
How to Buy a Home educates, protects, and connects first-time homebuyers to qualified vetted realtors in their area. Whether you're looking for DIY information or step-by-step guidance, How to Buy a Home is the #1 resource for first-time homebuyers.
What's up, homies? I'm David Sidoni, and today's 3 tips are all about solutions for you, the 2026 or 27 or even 28 first-time home buyer. I'm going to start with Abigail. She closed on a $399,000 home outside of Huntsville, Alabama in September of 2025.
Biggest tip from talking with my husband is really just talking to your unicorn team and just having those discussions early, even if you don't think you're ready, because you're just going to learn so much from 1, the process, and 2, that, hey, you don't need that 20%, and what you have usually is enough, and you can borrow against your 401k. Like, there's so many different options. What held us back the most was just, we thought we had to have a lot of money saved up, like 50 grand or something like that, and you don't need that to buy a home.
All right, after hearing that, either you are super stoked to hear that a real-life first-time homebuyer discovered she didn't have to have $50,000 to buy a home, and you're on the edge of your seat waiting to hear about all these underutilized tips and techniques that Abigail was talking about. Or when you heard that she was borrowing from her 401k, your butt cheeks clenched up. Look, I understand. This tip gets a lot of fear and apprehension. And while I appreciate and respect the intention behind the people who say that borrowing from any kind of retirement is fiscally irresponsible and a terrible idea, let me give you just a quick reminder. I'm just here to educate you, show you the math. I don't push anything on anybody. I'm about solutions that work in a new economic landscape. And I've found that right now there's a lot of changes. There's more mathematically beneficial ways for people who want to buy a home, options that don't make people house poor, that don't risk your future with a purchase today. And also, my solutions aren't here to sell you anything. I'm hit up on the daily from advertisers who want to pay me good money to solicit to you. Yet here we sit, 7 years in and still ad-free. I'm so passionate about advocating for first-time homebuyers, and I would never sell you out to make a buck. So this tip, it comes from an advocate. The current home buying game has changed dramatically, especially over the last 10 or 20 years. So I'm going to lay out the math to show you what's happening and how you can beat it. Now, when it comes to 401k, it's not always right for everybody, but I've been sharing this concept since I started 20 years ago. There's options to use your 401k, your IRA, or other retirement accounts. Buying a home simply is a diversification of your retirement portfolio. You just have to figure out what the best way is for you to get it started. Here's Amber, who bought her first home solo a few years ago. It was a $540,000 home in Virginia, and listen to what her CPA had to say about using her 401k.
When I was considering, how am I going to buy a house with, I don't have like any of a down payment in my mind at that time, I had started talking to a friend of mine, very good friend of mine, who's also a CPA. He helps me with my taxes and does, helps me through all that every year. And my initial thought was like, oh, maybe I could take out of my 401k, which is also usually a terrible idea. And I know better than that, but I kind of, put it in front of him just to see what he would say. And he was like, no, don't do that. You can just take a loan out against it. And I was like, oh, okay, what does that mean? So we kind of talked through it and I thought, okay, actually that's okay. That makes sense. And then later, as I was listening to your podcast, then you brought up the same thing. And it was kind of one of those things where like, you were already going through like, factual data, mathematics, things like that already made sense to me. And then you threw out this thing that like a very good friend of mine who's also a CPA talked to me about already. So I was kind of like, okay, like this guy knows what he's talking about and he's making very like valid points at this, stage in like the process. So kind of continued from there. It made sense to me.
So that's information straight from the home buyers' mouths. You're not just listening to me here. There are over 125 interviews in the podcast episode library from people who thought or were told that it would be impossible for them to buy a home. Turns out it wasn't an affordability problem for them. It was an information problem. Today's buyers need new strategic solutions, things that don't follow the traditional paths. What used to be considered responsible financial planning can now mathematically work against you in a big way. because paying high rents for longer than you need, that's not safe and responsible. It's just expensive, and expensive is not responsible. It's actually irresponsible to not explore all of your options. For the last few years, I know the news is saying that first-time homebuyers are in an affordability crisis. But the data and the forecasts for what's coming next, that's all in. We've got historically low inventory right now, and economists do not expect a big correction. And they're expecting we're probably going to be in the same prices for the next year or so. Interest rates, also the same thing. And the number of first-time homebuyers, which used to be 35 to 40% of the market, that's plummeted to 21%, the lowest amount since they started tracking the first-time homebuyers all the way back in 1981. And the average age of the first-time homebuyer used to be 32 years old. Well, last year it hit 40. I give you that information because when someone tells me that the traditional first-time home buying saving advice is working just fine, it's just dropping a little bit because it's adjusting to the new affordability, well, then I point to those numbers. 21% lowest ever, average age up to 40. That old playbook has produced record lows, and it's taking 8 more years to get it done. That's not an adjustment. That playbook isn't working with the new current economic situation, and it's costing an entire generation 8 years of wealth building. Amber's CPA was a great friend, someone who was up to date on the math behind the new financial planning for first-time homebuyers in this post-COVID world. But what I've found from the tens of thousands of people we talk to here is CPA and financial advisors who give that type of advice, they're actually kind of rare. Here's what's happening out there. This is Regina. She's another solo female buyer. She bought a $290,000 home in Michigan in 2025, and she found out that she wasn't getting solutions from her financial advisors.
I worked with a well-known finance company, if you will, right? Our retirement is through one of those companies, right?
Sure. Merrill Lynch, Edward Jones, one of the big ones.
One of the big ones, right? And they're very nice people, but they don't really tell you things. And I was really struggling, right, about what I do. And a friend of mine who used to be in finance, she helped me, which was amazing. And so choose your friends well. But B, she said, I think because you are so smart and the way you talk is so definitive that people think you know more than you know. Because I'm like, okay, this account, I want to get some money out of it. And that's all I know, right? Like take it from there, right? It'd be like me going, I want to buy a house. I live here. You take it from there. And you think, oh, she knows this. No, it's kind of like, continental divide. We've gone off the cliff and we got to find out how far down we go.
Because of liability.
Yes.
There are things that they can't say. They can't say pulling your money out of your 401k and putting it into a real estate investment is diversifying your portfolio and you'll actually get better returns. Because once they talk about better returns,
oh boy,
promissory situation, and they're on the hook. I think it's such a gigantic, huge part of this that when there are people like yourself who are smart, they're 24 years old and they go to talk to a financial advisor. The financial advisor thinks they understand.
Yes.
It's what's not said when you're asking about your 401k.
Yes.
That's the meat and potatoes.
That's the meat and potatoes. So my friend would say, Regina, this is your money. She said, look, you could take it all out and pay cash for this house. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's such a gangster move, right?
It is.
I wasn't quite that brave, but, she talked me through. And so we went online and, she talked me through over the phone. She's like, okay, how much do you want? And so I took a chunk out and put that into cash. And then she said, tomorrow you're going to call them and you're going to say, I want X amount and out of my account and blah, blah, blah. And that's what I did. And the lovely gentleman was like, yes. Oh, look, I see you put, $50K into cash. I'm like, yes, I did. That was as far as I knew how to go. And he giggled and then helped me, figure out the rest. So apparently I could have done it all on my own, but there's nothing on the internet. And I get the liability part. I so get it. But I needed help. And if I didn't have my friend, I don't know how I would have gotten there, you know?
So tip number 19, using your 401k, and the next two upcoming tips that pair with this one, they are the most underused, misunderstood, and I'm going to argue all day long, the most fiscally responsible tips that I teach. They're game-changing tools for first-time home buyers. Here's how it works for your 401k. For your primary home purchase, you can take a loan out from your 401k with no penalties and no taxable event. And that can help you fund your down payment, your closing costs, so you can stop paying someone else's mortgage and start building your equity. Now, some of you might be thinking, okay, wait a minute, dude, I keep hearing about this. This has got to be risky, right? I've always been told never to sacrifice my retirement for anything. Again, I 1000% agree with that sentiment, but today's math, it actually tells a different story. When this is done tactically to buy your home, this isn't sacrificial. It's strategic. It's not robbing your future. It's just redirecting it. Now, if you're one of those listeners who got pucker butt when I mentioned it, all I ask is that you hear me out. You can make your own decision when, in a minute, I'm going to lay out all the math. Don't listen to me. Listen to the numbers. I know that many of you, maybe you're frustrated with the market right now and you're thinking, I just got to keep saving until I can afford a down payment. And you're thinking that's the smart financial move. But between rent and home prices constantly increasing, inflation, stagnant wages, student loans, and I don't know, everything else that's squeezing the middle class, you're going to be pushing that day further and further away. And that's a lot of wealth lost. First-time home buyers need a smarter solution. Here's the mathematical truth. For many of you, using your retirement funds or adjusting your retirement funds, it might be the best or perhaps maybe even the only way that you can springboard yourself into stability and owning a home and having a chance to get into the middle class. And for some of you, it's just a savvy financial move. Because taking that loan on your 401k, it's not surrendering your future. The math says it's adding to it. You're expanding your retirement investing, doing what the pros actually recommend for investing for your future. Diversify your retirement portfolio. And think about this. When you do this, now you're really diversifying because you've got a real estate asset. Everything else you've got is most likely in the stock market. This is a true diversification, and all of your eggs aren't in that Wall Street basket. You're redirecting funds into another long-term asset, your home, which has so many types of growth. You've got equity growth, forced savings, the tax benefits, and an enormous mathematical benefit of using your monthly rent for gains, not just buying yourself shelter every month. And down the line, your first home is going to eventually transfer into your forever home, paid off, and just like your 401k in your retirement years, that will just be another bundle of money that you can use any way you like. I'm going to go into all the in and outs of how the 401k programs work, but first, I have to demystify the beneficial, not reckless, the indisputable math to relieve any of you who still have clenchy butt cheeks. Let's look at the math for two 30-year-old renters. We'll call them the saver and the 401k buyer. Both of them contribute $10,000 a year to a 401k, and they got a $3,000 employer match, so $13,000 a year. In this equation, we'll run the math with a 3% annual raise, and we'll average the returns on the 401k at 6.5%. They both rent for $2,800 a month. They both want to buy a $450,000 home. And so far, they both have $25,000 saved, but they set their target at a 10% down payment. That's $55,000. So they're both $30,000 short. So first we have the saver. Don't want to touch their retirement because they think that's a financially dumb move. The 401k buyer, they're going to take a $30,000 loan against their 401k and buy now. The saver's looking at their situation. Once again, they both want to put 10% down, but actually neither one of them needs 10% down to find an affordable monthly payment, but that's a whole nother podcast. So right now, I'll just use 10% to show you how undeniable the math is. For the saver, 10% of $450,000 down is $45,000 plus $10,000 for closing, $55,000 total, $30,000 short. So what they can do is they can add $833 a month to their savings. That's $10,000 a year for 3 years. So that way they can buy a home in 3 years without touching their 401k. They'll make $30,000 over 3 years for $833 a month. Add that to their $2,800 a month rent. So that means for the next 3 years, to get to where they want to be to buy a home, their new monthly payment with the $833 added to their rent is going to be $3,633. How's that compared to the 401 buyer who took $30,000 out of their 401k and bought a $450,000 house now? Their full monthly payment for the new mortgage, the principal, the interest, the PMI, which is only $108 a month, the taxes and the insurance, that whole thing is $3,281. Remember, the saver is at $3,633. But we're at $3,281 for the 401k buyer, but they've got to repay the 401k. It's $364 a month. Oh, and by the way, Fannie Mae, if you get a loan, your 401k payment is not counted against your DTI. Okay, so we take the PITI PMI, that's $3,281. That's the regular payment. We add $364, and their payment is $3,645 for the 401k home buyer. The saver, $3,633. That's a lot of numbers, but it comes down to this. The difference between renting for 3 more years or owning a $450,000 home right now is $12 a month. That's not a financial decision. That's 2 coffees a month. It only costs the person who bought a home $432 over 3 years more than what the saver did. And that's just getting started, because here's where the big math happens. The saver paid $2,800 a month for 3 years into rent. If that goes up, let's just say even a small $100 a year, over 3 years, that's $104,400 in rent that they spent that did nothing for their financial future. The 401k buyer immediately started using that payment for themselves. And after 3 years, they've reduced the principal on their loan by $14,023, already way ahead of the saver. Just that first mathematical piece right there, $14,023 versus $432. So far, the 401k buyer is winning. Now, if we add in a very low conservative 2% increase in prices for the home that's going to appreciate over the next 3 years, that's $27,544. So that means in 3 years, the 401k buyer is already ahead $41,567. Of course, you have to take away the 2 coffees a month. So we also have to subtract $432 for that. But it's still $41,000 more than what the saver ends up with. And this is not even the entire math. In the next episode, I'm going to go into detail the tax benefits of home ownership. So in this example, if we use a 22% tax bracket, taking advantage of the mortgage interest tax deduction over the 3 years, the 401k buyer would also get a minimum $7,000 back from the IRS. So now we push their number up to $48,567. That's how much better they're doing than the person who didn't pull from their 401k. And the math is not even done yet, because if the saver waited 3 years, and even at only a very low 2% appreciation, conservative number there, well, now that $450,000 home is going to cost them $478,000, increasing their down payment and closing costs by $13,000. And who knows if homes are going to go up more than that, because we still got this low inventory, and who knows what's going to happen to interest rates. And a quick side note, remember this: if you're looking at things from the homeowner, you don't ever have to stress about interest rates again, because if rates do go down, you just refinance into that new rate. But if you're the saver or the waiter and rates come down, there is so much pent-up buyer demand that they're going to come out in droves. Prices will be driven up, bidding the same $450,000 home up to $480,000 or $500,000. So yeah, they might get a lower rate, but you're sitting there refinancing into the same rate, and you only paid $450,000 for the home. So the math so far, the buyer's ahead $48,567. And if I use that tiny 2% appreciation over the next 3 years, then the saver is going to pay an extra $13,000. So the new total is $61,567. Now, I know some of you might be thinking, oh, but that 401k, what about the losses for the buyer who recklessly dared to withdraw from the almighty untouchable 401k? What happened to that compound interest? All right, let me be very clear about what actually happened mathematically, because this is where a lot of people tend to get this wrong. The buyer didn't remove $30,000 forever from their retirement fund, which would obviously lower the long-term compounding interest. They loaned it to themselves, and they're paying it right back immediately. And they're going to pay it back over 10 years. And here's the catch. They're going to pay it back with 8% interest, but you're paying it back to yourself. They're actually committing to pay back $43,678, which ironically means that they're going to have a greater 10-year commitment to their 401k than the person who is doing the quote-unquote responsible saving. What's really responsible is to take a little time, put some effort into your own big picture thinking instead of just putting it into a 401k and forget about it, and because it's easy and simple and that's what most people do. And here's the mathematical punchline. What happens to the 401k? At year 3, they've already paid back $14,425. So if both the saver and the 401k buyer keep contributing like they always were, and if the buyer continues paying themselves back over 10 years, which they had already allocated into their monthly budget, when both of them are sitting at 59 and a half, which is almost 30 years later, the saver's 401k is $1,877,000. The 401k buyer, the home buyer, their 401k is $1,891,000. It's $14,000 more. They didn't raid their future retirement to buy something today that they can't afford. They actually moved things around and funded their future, buying a home with that money that's supposed to be working for them. They just found a better way to make it work. So the math I used here, they come out 60 grand ahead in the first 3 years, and I used some very conservative low numbers. But more importantly, they took control of their lives today instead of pushing that 3 years down the road. And who knows what could happen in the next 3 years. That's the math of doing a 401k. And I understand it might take you guys a little while to get the gist of this. But once you do, that light bulb above your head, it's going to be visible for miles and miles. There are tons of different variables. Obviously, that was just one. So you need to run your own numbers. Here's another real person who did this. Claudia was a solo buyer in Michigan. She's a drama teacher. So I believe the technical term is that she is criminally underpaid. So saving up for a down payment, that was going to take quite a while. Then she found the modern day solutions.
We talked through everything. I mean, we talked through, the First Time Homebuyers grant. We talked through, because I've had quite a few jobs in my life, and I have 401ks built up. So could I borrow against that? Right. So we talked through every scenario to figure out what was the right scenario for me that made sense, that was going to, work to my benefit rather than my detriment. And so I felt like I went into it super informed about my choices and what we were doing and why we were doing it, which was awesome because I didn't know anything about any of this. So
for some of you, this might be the one piece that puts you over the top. But using your retirement funds, this is all based on your complete financial picture. It's math that can work for you. And for a lot of you, this could be your way in. Lots of renters don't think that they have the funds. But some of you already have the money. You're just looking in the wrong account. Your down payment's hiding in some retirement plan somewhere. I've walked hundreds of first-time homebuyers through this myself. And done right, it can be not only safe and smart, but liberating. Here's Jeff and Sierra, who bought in Jacksonville.
Financially, though, the biggest impact for us was talking with the lender. He asked the question, doing the pre-approval process. He asked, do you have any family and friends willing to donate and help you guys out? And we were like, I'm sure if we started a GoFundMe, we'd have some, folks contributing, but, we're not going to bank on that. We want to do it ourselves. So then he mentioned, or I had mentioned to him, my 401k. And I have been fortunate enough. I've been working in corporate world since 2017. So I've been contributing to it. And I had around 30,000 or more in there. And when I mentioned that to my lender, he was like, you could take a loan and pay yourself back. And that kind of clicked for us, and we took that opportunity and ran with it. So taking that loan, it was just this portion. I didn't take the entire 401k and flood it, but no, taking that portion, that was the amount that helped us really break the lease, help us move, buy furniture when we got in here, to where we didn't just flood our savings and say, all right, we bought our house, let's start over with our savings. So.
Well, there's no need for a GoFundMe when your team is first-time homebuyer specialists who reveal solutions for renters every single day. In just a minute, I will get into the details of the process, how to use your 401k. I just want to make sure this is the introduction to the concept. And you can see this concept is just going to be another puzzle piece in your home buying picture. And I know a lot of you don't want to keep losing money waiting to buy. This could be the lifeline for 2026. And instead of just putting your retirement on autopilot the old way, which, by the way, is really scary in today's market, looking at this math is actually more thought out than the old way people do retirement. And I got to let you know, there are so many financial and investment advisors that aren't even including the lost rent into your equation. They never discuss a rent replacement strategy for the biggest monthly financial output for their clients, something they're dropping every single month. So here's Abigail from the top of the show. She bought a home in 2025. Let's hear what she says.
I would really emphasize what we talked about a little bit earlier. There are so many other ways to fund a house other than just a savings account. Like, I have a coworker who he moves for work and the company helps cover cost, but he's going back to Dallas, and you know what? He's going to pull out of his 401k and pay himself back. Like, that is such a big option. People, I really do want them to know about. Even if you're younger, like I'm 28, I don't have that much in my 401k, but I would have enough to cover if I needed to. As long as you go through the right hoops, talk to the right people, make sure that you understand fully what you're doing. You do have to pay yourself back with interest if you've done it before, but it's an option.
And here's Tim and Vanessa from the Tampa Bay area. They didn't think they could buy a home, but they did in 2025.
Thankfully, I had enough in my 401k to where I could pull it out and not have any sort of penalties on me.
Say that again. First time home buyers can take money out of their 401k with what?
Yes. No penalties.
And no taxable event. Thank you so much.
I'm so blessed that I learned about that, and that honestly kind of saved us because of the time crunch, because
we weren't really planning on this at all.
Like, we were like he had said, we were talking about it, and thankfully, like, we had started a bit of a savings, and
we literally, like, several months prior, we're like, all right, we're gonna start getting serious on getting a house, because you keep pushing it back, and then you keep pushing it back, and then it just 4 or 5 years keeps going by. So
I'll say to everyone, if you have a 401k, look into it.
What's the worst that happens?
Right.
You look into it and you know it's there.
You're just paying yourself back, and it's just it just gave me a peace of mind. It took a weight off of our shoulders that we didn't need in this situation, and it was just a real blessing in disguise, honestly. It really was.
Yes, it was a mathematical blessing, because you're using what you have to fund a more financially favorable outcome over the next few years as a homeowner, not a saver or a market waiter. Once you do this, you're going to have 2 set it and forget it automatic retirement plans working for you every single day. Okay, homies, that's the philosophy and the math behind it. Now we'll get into the details. You heard Vanessa and I talk about the fact that there were no penalties and no taxable event. Obviously, this is just guidelines for you, things I've heard from thousands of buyers over the years. But you got to make sure you talk to your money manager, the fund manager, and a tax professional. Be sure that you check on them to verify. But these are the basic guidelines of how this works. I'll do the 401k first, and then later on in the episode, I'm going to talk about IRAs. Okay, option number 1 with 401ks, you take out a loan. That's what we talked about. This is what most first-time home buyers find is their best option because you're borrowing from yourself and you pay it back. Now, generally, you can borrow up to 50% of your vested balance or $50,000, whichever is less. So it's $50,000 max if you got a ton in there. You repay it to yourself through automatic payroll deductions with interest. And remember, that interest you're paying back to yourself. You're actually borrowing the money and then committing to increase what you're going to put in your 401k over the next 10 years, which most people want to do anyway. But you bought yourself the ability to end up buying a home and start building wealth on two different paths. When you do this, there are no early withdrawal penalties and no income tax on it as long as you repay on the schedule. And here's the big first-time homebuyer advantage. Normal 401k loan, if you just got a regular loan for not buying a house, you have to pay that back in 5 years. But the law carves out an exception for first-time homebuyers. If the loan's used to buy your principal residence, that 5-year limit doesn't apply. You can get longer terms. A lot of the first-time home buyers that I've worked with or coached over the years, they do plans anywhere from 10 to 15 years, some of them even longer. The IRS specifically wrote an exception into the law for people buying their primary residence. This is not a loophole I found. This is the government telling you, we see you. We know it's hard. We can't go out and give everyone a free $50,000 to put as their down payment on a house, but we can make it easier for you to use your 401k. All right, let me tell you about the one risk with this loan. If you do take out a 401k loan and you get laid off or you quit, some individual plans, they want the loan paid back. And if you can't do that, then it becomes taxable. Though you do have the option to roll it into your IRA account to avoid the tax issue. And if you're under 59 and a half, then sometimes they're also going to give you the 10% penalty. So this is another one you got to make sure you talk to your fund manager as well as your tax professional. The second option for 401k is something we call hardship withdrawal. And the IRS still qualifies buying a home as a hardship. But the way this works is this is a straight withdrawal. You're not paying it back. It's gone from your retirement forever. This one you do pay based on your ordinary income tax, and most of the time it's a 10% penalty on top of it. That's a pretty big hit. But using one tax formula, it would cost you about $8,000 if you pulled out $25,000 as a straight hardship withdrawal. And that 8K is gone. Everyone's situation is different, and I do know that have been some financially savvy buyers who choose this option based on their entire financial picture. Sometimes people have a big promotion coming or a coming inheritance or just a big change in the way their finances are going to act. Or maybe they just simply have a desire to buy a home ASAP, but they don't want to have to continue paying back on their 401k, so they're willing to take the hit. You might find in your research that there are some bills sitting in committee talking about removing the penalty and the taxation on this. They're not laws yet, and if either one of those passes, I will let you know. But my general advice is when you're looking at a loan versus a hardship withdrawal, look at the loan option first. I showed you the math. It could be pretty awesome for you. Now, there's some other great stuff with 401ks. Let's talk about lost or forgotten money. This could be your ticket to home ownership. If you've had multiple jobs, like we talked to Claudia and Regina already in this episode, you could have some dead 401k sitting there and they're really not doing much for your future. So we'll listen to them now because they did the math and they decided to sacrifice the penalty and the tax hit today to pull those funds so they could fund their initial investment into the monster wealth builder, their homes. Let's go over the finances. Because you were ready pretty quickly.
Yes.
But in your original form that you sent me, you said that you had like $7,000 saved. Where'd the rest of the money come from for the down payment?
Right. Well, even the $7,000 came from a 401k that I had and from an old job. And so I've had like three major jobs. Right. So I had my Louisiana job, right? So I had that small one. And then the job I had before this one had a really nice 401, rolled over into a 401k. And so I just took a chunk out of there.
I can't believe this is another thing I've never touched on when I talk about 401ks is the dead ones.
Yes.
They're wonderful things, but they sit there until you hit a certain age.
Right.
And in the meantime, here you are with these, all your stuff in basically one investment, the stock market.
Yes.
So if you have multiple, use some of those old ones. Find out what the tax would be or the penalty would be, and add that into your equation.
Exactly.
All right, now let's get into another aspect of 401ks, because a lot of you out there, if you've had multiple jobs, you might have lost or forgotten money, and that could be your ticket to home ownership. You could have dead 401ks there, and a lot of times they're not doing very much for your future. I talked to Regina about this, and Regina did the math and decided to sacrifice the penalty and the tax hit to fund the initial investment into a monster wealth builder, Regina's home. And there's something new for 2026 with this, and it's new, and I've never talked about it before, because a lot of you might have money in a 401k that you don't even know about, because there was a new law that started in 2025 called Secure 2.0. It's for 401k plans that started after December of 2022. And what it is your employers are required to enroll you at a default 3 to 10%. Part-time workers, even you qualify. It just takes 2 years. So before you think you don't have anything, log on and look. There are buyers who are finding $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 sitting in some 401k account that they didn't know about or they forgot about it. And that could be a down payment. So with a little detective work on your part, you can find not only the math, but maybe you'll even find some hidden money. Too many people think that they're stuck and they're consciously doing their best to save away, but they've got no clue they have solutions ready today. So let's listen to what Regina discovered.
And I want to just take a detour back about the finance thing and using your 401k. Not everyone's 401k works the same way. So when I met with the lender, he said, you don't qualify for any of the sort of bonus programs like in my state of Michigan. They will.
Too much money.
Yeah, I mean, too much. They have a grant if you're a first-time homebuyer. He's like, yeah, none of that works for you. So you take a loan from your 401k and then you pay yourself back. And that's how we're going to go. I'm like, okay, great. And I call up and get told yours doesn't work that way. And that's when I got lost, right?
Yeah.
And so just keep at it, because as my friend said, it's your money.
Yes.
And maybe you too are in the situation where you could take it all out and pay for the house.
Yeah.
Which I don't necessarily recommend, but it just felt so good.
Yeah. The gangster move, you better have some financial acumen behind it to back it up.
Right.
So then what was the solution? Did you use one of those other 401ks?
Yeah, I used the one from my most recent past job because it was such a big chunk that I could just take it, not have to repay it, and take enough out to pay for the taxes so I don't have to worry about that either. Yeah.
So for those of you who are not necessarily, I do this every day.
Mm-hmm.
Regina just did this, and so it's all fresh on her.
Yeah.
Every 401k is managed differently by what we call a different money manager.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, Google your uncle, some realtor who doesn't know what they're doing. They cannot tell you definitively, oh, you have a 401k? You can do this.
Yes.
So there it is. Get proactive for yourself. You need a new playbook, but you're going to have to get in there and figure out how to make it happen for you, or get yourself a great team that can walk you through it. Using your retirement to figure out how to buy a home, that's one piece of the entire rent replacement strategy. There are multiple different tactics. We've got low down payment options, figuring out how to work with PMI, interest rate buy downs, seller credits, concessions, cash back from them, down payment assistance, gifts from family, changing your monthly savings contributions, which we'll talk about in just a minute. A realtor who can actually negotiate you lower costs in buying the home, that could be another way for you to actually make this happen. And this final piece, using your 401k safely to own a home sooner and not miss out on the next few years of appreciation. Using your retirement, it's just one of all those tactics. So explore them all, create your own little formula, and figure out what the best options are for you. And I'm definitely talking to you, the 28, 32, and 35-year-old that's been working for a while and has a good retirement plan in place, but you're desperately trying to figure out how to save up enough to buy a home. You've got one retirement vehicle running right now, but have you considered what the next retirement vehicle is that you're going to add to your life? What else are you going to do to invest for your retirement? That's the way to look at a home. I mean, think about it this way. If you could start a second 401k today to double the security of your future, you would totally do it. But in order to do that, in order to fund it, you would have to take money from your extra savings at the end of the month. When you diversify by using some of your 401k for a home purchase, that doesn't have to happen. You're getting years of contributions to a second retirement vehicle that's going to be a huge piece of your puzzle, and you're paying for it with the money that you already pay out. It's another long-term retirement investing vehicle that gets funded with the rent money that you already pay. All right, tip 20, temporarily change and redistribute your monthly savings budget to include a home savings account. All right, now to the boomers and the ultra-conservative people, this tip is definitely giving them a panic attack. But when it's analyzed with a savvy financial perspective, hey, guess what? The math wins again. To add a boost to your down payment savings accounts, you can temporarily reduce your contributions to your current retirement vehicles so that you can have the funds to buy a home and add a second retirement vehicle. And this works for any other savings account too. Here's how Anna, a single mom from Atlanta, funded her home purchase.
Yeah, I mean, another big thing that I learned from you, or it kind of reframed things for me, was retirement investing. You know, I'm not old, but I'm not in my 20s anymore. And so I'm I'm investing, I'm putting into my retirement as much as I can. And I'm like, oh, I gotta save. So I did not dip into my retirement for my closing costs, but what I did do was decrease my contribution.
This is from Anna the Frugal. You're not reducing your retirement. You're reducing your contribution from one place and putting it into another.
Yeah. And I hadn't really thought about it like that until that was on the Florida trip. I listened to that episode and I was like talking to my speakers. I was like, no way. And it kind of was like a light bulb for me that I was like, oh, as soon as I get to where I can open my computer up, I'm going to go in the system and like half my retirement contributions. And like now, once I get settled in the new place and everything, I'll crank them back up. But just to have that cash coming in to help me with the closing and now the things that I need to do to the place to get it ready to move in, that was a big help. And I don't feel like I'm cheating myself.
A temporary solution to buy yourself a permanent, huge addition to your financial well-being. Here's how to do this tip. If your employer is matching your contribution, obviously keep doing that. It's free doubling of your money. But if you are sitting there and you're thinking you're still decades from retirement and you contribute more than the match level, just consider lowering your contribution to just that matched number and then take the extra and redistribute that into a down payment fund for your home. You're temporarily reducing from one account and adding to a new one. And eventually you're going to have two of them running. Now, your home's not going to give you a monthly statement, but you do get to live in it. I've seen people do this lots of different ways. If you've got a whole bunch of different automated savings accounts each month, you can do it with any of them. It's all math. If you're putting $1,000 into a 401k and $500 into an index fund and $500 into another savings account, I've had people say, hey, how much long-term am I really going to lose on this if I cut things by half and I take $1,000 into my savings and I put $1,000 in my savings account? Reducing the contributions is something you can just do for a little while. Just getting in even a month earlier is going to save you that huge rent payment that goes to nothing. And most of the people do this temporarily and eventually they go right back to the same old savings plan after they got into the home and they get adjusted. All right, tip number 21. This is the same concept as the 401k, but with an IRA. This is one that sometimes might sound too good to be true, but it's real. So if you've got an IRA set up, you got a score. With an IRA, you can take up to $10,000 out. It's not the full 10 grand because you do have a 10% withdrawal penalty, and you are going to pay taxes. So if you're in the 22% tax bracket, then $10,000 becomes about $7,800. Now, if you're married and you both qualify, that means you start at $20,000 minus the taxes and the fees. When you take that money out, you do have to use it for a home purchase within 120 days. And it's for any new first-time home buyer or someone that hasn't owned a home for the last 2 years. It's an amazing option that you can explore with your team to see if that final, $7,800, if that's the last piece of your savings plan that's going to help you start home shopping. Maybe that's something you want to explore. And as we wind this one up, here's a final thought from Sally. She's another real buyer who really wanted to own a home. At the time, she didn't think she had any options. So taking a page from step 5, she was worried that her student loans were going to hold her back. And spoiler alert, she was approved with student loans. And with the right guidance, she found out that she had several solutions.
$30K, but I was worried about it. I was like, okay, how does my student loans impact my approval odds and everything? Like, how much money do we need to save? Because you have this whole 20% down that you keep hearing about. So I was like, well, by the time we save that 20% for the house price that we're looking at right now, we're not going to be able to afford it still because, prices keep just going up. So it was like all of that misinformation that I had. I didn't know much about the PMI and all of that. So that's why I was thinking this is not possible. And Ashley was excellent in running everything and telling me well, if you use your 401k savings, if you take a loan, this is how much you need for the down payment. If you buy a house for this price or this price or this price, then she was the one telling me you can afford this price. And I was like, whoa, really? I have no idea. So yeah, all of that whole process was so, I don't know, I can't even describe it. It was so amazing, to have that reassurance that, yes, you can do this. And you're completely wrong about thinking that you can't afford it,
Here's one last thought on the tips I laid out for you today. If this podcast today and all the math have brought up more questions than answers, good. Buying a home is a big freaking deal. Explore everything. Explore your options. Your solutions, they're right there and they're in the math. And if you've got questions on how to do this or how to build your personal spreadsheet, the episodes in the show notes, they're going to go deeper into all the topics of rent versus buy and figuring out what works for you. And of course, you can always go to howtobuyahome.com and just ask me your personal question. Today's buyers, they all need up-to-date solutions, not outdated advice that wastes years of expensive rent. So now take this, let this be your starting point and look over your situation and find solutions. You can do this.
Looking for more DIY education or your own personal step-by-step guidance through the home buying journey? Since 2019, How to Buy a Home has been the #1 resource for first-time home buyers. So visit howtobuyahome.com to get started.